Good afternoon. We'll go ahead and get started. This is Everything New is Old Again. Old and dirty again, actually. This is basically about prop weathering, and basically hard surface weathering is what I'll call it. Tomorrow I'll have one on costume weathering, more soft surface weathering. So if you're interested in that, that'll be tomorrow afternoon at 5, I think. It's right before the fiberglass demo, which is being given by a fellow 501st member, and I am actually going to attend that one because I think it's going to be super interesting. Okay, very good. So, all right. So basically, when we're talking about kind of hard item weathering, what we're trying to do is make it look like it's been used, old. Run through some stuff, not cleaned very well, rode hard and put away wet, whatever your favorite metaphor happens to be. And so we're going to actually deal with a couple of different, actually it's going to be right in that camera angle there, a couple of different props today. This is a Black Series incinerator helmet. This is actually not an approvable helmet for the 501st, mostly because of this big battery door here in the back and because it's a Rogue One style with the divots on the tube stripes. But it is the right shape, and it's made of plastic. So it's going to be a nice stand-in for the same sort of technique you might use, especially the same sort of techniques I used on the helmets on spikes on our display back in the other room. We also have a 3D print DL44. It's been basically painted, so the parts that are black, the parts that are supposed to be brown are brown, and the silver bits are silvery. And then we have a Walmart Lola 5, which I felt could use some character, so we're going to weather her up a little bit. So that's basically the start. And what I'll do is I will kind of go various techniques, and then I'll apply them to all three of them in some way, and then we'll move to the next technique and go from there. So mostly this involves, my process anyway, mostly involves paint and whatnot, so there's going to be some opportunities for us to not damage the hotel's table by covering things up. So, work in this direction. For any detail, I'll make sure and put them under the camera for you. There is one item that I actually used in last. So the first thing we're going to work with is going to be what I kind of consider a base layer of things, and that's going to be a simple wash. And that's going to be designed to do a couple things, and I'll retrieve that paintbrush later. It's going to be designed to gather in natural nooks and crannies, make things look kind of dirty, and it's going to gather in scratches and really bring them out and make them highlight. And if you ever, seen like an old motorcycle helmet or something like that, all the scratches have nice dark, almost black, kind of edging to them because just the wear and tear and the accumulation of dirt. So to start that, we're going to use two different kinds of washes for our items here, and actually I'll separate them by that. We're going to do what's a typical black wash, and then we'll do what I call a dirt wash, or since I am in the process of trying to learn German, I call it a Schmutzwash, which is just essentially a nice dirty, kind of brownish, grayish color. Schmutz, which literally just means dirt in German. So I'm going to use the dirt wash on the blaster because it's already black, so black wash isn't really going to do much for it. For Lola and the incinerator, I'm going to go ahead and use the black wash. Yeah, well, according to the website, when I bought it, it was an incinerator, but I will not argue with you about it because I don't necessarily, the different paint jobs, I don't.
It's two troopers that have the exact same paint marking and weathering, red incinerator, yellow mortar.
Okay.
Supporting the hot toys.
Okay, fantastic. Well, and they're probably going to be better at it than I am, so I am not going to push the point. So our trooper here, adjective left off. You can kind of see, and I'll kind of show the camera here. There's been some attempt to kind of damage the paint, but it's very new damaged paint. It's like, oh, well, okay, this is a very shiny damaged helmet. So I would prefer to have it look a little look a little worse, honestly. So the way I'll usually start most of my washes is with a good bit of water, and then I'll start with usually, there we go, there's a black and a brown. And I didn't learn my lesson from the other day and pre-opened my my bottles of paint here, so please bear with me while if y'all wouldn't mind coming and grabbing some bottles of paint and taking this plastic off of them, that'd be great. Hey, it's an interactive panel. You're helping. All right, so generous bit of brown in that. Even in my black wash, I like to have a little brown, just to kind of soften it up slightly. And then with the, you know what? There we go. Nice dollop of the black. Yep, some of them may have been opened. I just grabbed what I had on my shelf, and so then we'll take our handy, because I forgot to bring any stirring sticks, spoons from the hotel room service, and any port in a storm, right, for the stirring. And so we end up with a very kind of black-brown liquid that we'll apply to our prepared surface, which I have yet to do, so we'll go from there. So actually, in preparing the surface, you can do a lot of things. For this particular demo, I'm simply going to do scratches. I have been known to take parts and put them in a cardboard box with some bolts and nuts, shake them around a little bit, give them little dents and little divots, and and that's a nice effect as well. But I figured that would be a little loud for the microphones for this particular. So I'll usually just take a 80 grit sandpaper or something like that, just kind of run it along some of the contours, especially where you're for the troopers outside on our stakes. I did it this way because most of the weathering on that was going to come from the wind, the winds of Tatooine and sandstorms and things like that. So, and the 80 grit gives you a nice scratch without being a deep gouge, I find. And so the other place you want to apply those sorts of wear and tear is going to be anything that's going to touch something. So if it's going to have rubbed against something, like so the edges of the ear cups, I would probably scuff up a little more, because that's going to be the first thing to hit anything when you put the helmet down somewhere. Same thing over here on the cheeks, not by the hubby tips, and by the nose. And again, as you can see, they've already kind of tried to take some of that paint off for you. This will add some scratches and some character to that as well. So from here, we'll go to the macro stage. I didn't know it had a name. And go ahead and just apply the wash. And this is where it gets slightly messy. But I'll usually just kind of pour and kind of smear and schmutz as I go. You can take a couple of applications as you go kind of down it. Get in there with your hands and get all nice and dirty. And as you kind of wipe it away, it should be remaining in the scratch. And if it isn't, oh, there's one. There's a good one. I'll show you that one on the video. Maybe we're too bright here. I wonder if I shade the. Yeah, you can kind of see it there. But anyway, trust me, I'll pass this around so you actually have a better chance once we do a little more to it. So yeah, we're just trying to put enough along things that'll gather in the places that we want it to gather. And so things like the brow ridge here, things like the stripes, things like the nooks and crannies and the tears and things like that. So as those kind of come off there. And we can also apply this with a brush if we feel a little neater, and I probably should be doing that because it's not really all that, let's say, graceful process. And again, as you're kind of wiping things clean, you're kind of intentionally missing the deep corners. So you're not doing a deep cleaning, you're just kind of doing a surface schmutzing, if you will. Try that with the brush. Getting our traps and tiers a little more. In fact, if you're not familiar with the terminology on a stormtrooper helmet, the big gray areas along the top of along the brow ridge are called traps because they're trapezoidal in shape. And the areas indented underneath the eyes to the corners is called the tiers because, well, they look like tears. So.
Was this just really watered down paint? Sorry, I missed
Just
that.
really just watered down paint, yep. So again, in fact, I'm going to have to water down a paper towel to kind of make this not look like just a Jackson Pollock reproduction by a 3-year-old. But so what I really want is most of the surface paint to come away with the rag. And then I want just the corners that I'm not pushing into to really grab that paint and hang on to it. So, and these are acrylic paints, so they are water-based, so you do have a little open time before they kind of dry up on you and become harder to remove. And in this case, we're not going for a, I spent a week underneath a jet exhaust kind of carbon scoring sort of look. We're going for more normal wear and tear. I'm stationed on a planet, my CO isn't paying a lot of attention to what I'm doing because he's got his own problems, sort of deal, and so I'm not really being made to maintain my armor in the highest Empire standard. So, kind of a, not quite as pathological a case as a sand trooper, but certainly. All right, so that's pulled out some of those scratches a little better. So we'll start here on this one, and I'll go ahead and start this one kind of going around. Clean up just the basic edges of those, and kind of see how that has changed the look of that particular helmet. If we're making Lola a little more interesting, we would do the same thing for her. So again, we'll take kind of sanding, and for her, we'll kind of want to hit the edges pretty hard. Because again, the edges of this circle are going to be what's going to, find a pocket or hit a wall or what have you, or while in flight, happen to hit something. So you can kind of see we're pulling up some of the paint with the scratching, but we're also just kind of, I'm even going to go ahead and throw a couple on the lens just because it would be unrealistic not to. There we go. All right. We'll go ahead and start with the brush with Lola. We probably should start with that on the incinerator as well, or the Inferno. The Trooper, no adjective supplied. No, absolutely not. Again, if I get caught in a question of lore, I'm happy to be corrected because I want to be correct. And I want to say the right things, but I also tend to say the things I think are right until I'm told otherwise. So definitely don't let me suffer under a bad apprehension. So, all right, so again, kind of gathering in the scratches a little bit. We'll go over just a little more. There's some nice edges where the wings open and where there are some kind of printed indentations. We can hit kind of pretty hard to let that kind of gather in there, and then do our very light dust off, so that it kind of retains some of that dirtiness. And you'll notice that I'm not, doing much of a rub so much as I am kind of a daub to the parts. And you could go a little further on this if you wanted to go look at areas where, say, maybe there's something mechanical going on, like a leg or an arm or something, or a hinge. And if you think that, for example, there might be some sort of motor under it, you could do something a little heavier, black, you could actually take like black E6000 and kind of daub it in there and make it look like an oil leak kind of thing. So yeah, so that's a little more of and we'll actually mix up a different mix I mentioned before, the dirt mix. And for that, I like to start actually with a gray, which I think is this. Where did my glasses go? Okay, apparently I'm not wearing glasses today. So, all right. So we'll start with a gray. And I will add a little bit of brown to it. And even just a bit of tan. I apologize in advance if you didn't think you were going to be doing a lot of exercising today. So, all right, so here's a nice muddy color. I make this color a lot, so I'm pretty happy usually with the results. Plus, it's never the same thing twice, but that's okay. It all looks nice and dirty. Yeah, I don't have any idea. So, I don't know if you can see that. The camera's pretty hot, so it's actually running fairly white. So actually, that previous wash that I showed you earlier looked a lot more brownish than it did before. So, in the interest of making sure you kind of see what color I'm talking about without having it be, and you're not that large an audience. So this is kind of the color I'm going to show here. So it's kind of a nice light gray sort of color, kind of beige-ish.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Looks like
So,
yeah.
yep. So it kind of has almost a really weak chocolate milk look to it. Like the kind of chocolate milk that your mother wants to make for you instead of the kind you want to make for yourself. Because chocolate syrup's expensive. Exactly. So again, same process. Nothing really new under the sun there. I will rinse my brush out briefly. A little black won't hurt the process. Let's start. Take our wash, kind of run it along the edges where it can catch a bit of dirt, especially these little veins here in the front of the blaster. Draw those away. Like so. You can take a couple of applications to really kind of deepen and it depends on how deeply you want it to look vaguely neglected, I will say. It's obviously someone who really treated their weapon as a showpiece, would disassemble it and polish it and all that, and maintain it very well and all that. Someone whose gun is more of a working item, they may be more interested in how it fires rather than how it looks. So, depends on what kind of DL44 owner you want to be, I guess. So, and again, this is where some of the nooks and crannies created by the various parts of the weapon kind of help you out because they're naturally hard to get to anyway. So you're not going to be able to get as much of the dirt out, and that's going to be the natural places where dirt is going to collect on an item. So, there we go. Do a little here on the back as well. Oh, not quite as well mixed as I seem to think I am. So, and I'll pay particular attention to certain parts. Go ahead and hit the grip pretty hard. Kind of the various areas of the scope. Pull those away, like so. Alright. So that's actually, even with just that brief application, it's starting to look pretty much more used than it did when we started. I will probably want to actually go in and be a little more conscientious about removing that information from there, but that's material from there. But it does kind of also serve to knock down the shine a little bit. So this started off as a 3D print, a very good 3D print, by the way. I mean, I had to do almost no surface prep to this to get it to look, smooth and ready to go. And so I was, was very impressed with the vendor that I got the kit from, that they were able to produce such a nice print. Although as technology moves along, I guess I should be less surprised by that sort of thing. So definitely going to try and hit this area here, this little notch, pretty hard, because that's going to be an area nobody's going to think of, and it's going to be nice and deep. I'm going to collect a lot of lovely, lovely schmutz. All right, so go ahead and just do the surface blot on that. Again, you can see we've really knocked down the shine on the wood grips. We've really knocked down the shine on the receiver and the trigger assembly. We've got some other things in mind for this, for our next technique, but this is a good base to start from. This will give us a nice place to go with this. So I'll pass this around. Like number 1 or number 2 in my arsenal is a dry brushing technique. Oh, oops, sorry. Yeah. Well, I'm just trying to make sure I end up paying the hotel for stuff. No, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. So the next thing I would go with would be a dry brush technique, and that is going to be to either kind of shade areas that I want to have kind of come out, or knock down areas that I want to have kind of fade. And so in this case, I believe I will do, for the Stormtrooper, because it is white plastic, what I'm really going to be doing is enhancing kind of the dark wash I've already done. So, oh, that's fine. There we go. Nope, that's silver. So, all right. So I'm going to go with a. Has that got a? Okay, weird. That is weird. It definitely has a piece of paper in it. Okay, that's fantastic. I just had a black I was using, or at least a dark gray. Nope, that's that metallic again. Where did that go? Oh well. Anyway. All right. Huh?
You have a goblin.
Apparently I have a goblin. That is true, or a gremlin or something. Because that is. The Jawa I built earlier, there we go, has taken life, and under the auspices of okay, do not try this at home, kids. Yeah, so there's a lid within the lid, apparently, which is like never been in any bottle of paint I have bought at a hobby store ever, until today when I need it not to be there. So, oh, you know what? I know what happened last time. I know why I used the black. I just poured it out of the bottle. So I'll just do that here. Because it's not really as important how much paint you have, because you're not going to be using a lot with a dry brush technique. So I just want a decent enough blob of paint to work with. Put the lid back on and send that to the incinerator later, apparently. So the basics of the dry brush technique are, as the name implies, using a mostly dry brush to apply the paint very little bits at a time. So the way I like to do that, and it's probably the way everybody likes to do it, but I like to feel special, is to take like a flat brush, and depending on how much area you want to cover, you may go with a narrower or wider brush. This is a nice good compromise on the width. You'll take it and you'll add a little bit of your paint, just to the tip, and then I'll run it across the paper towel, and I'll show this over here actually, so you can kind of see what I'm doing with it. as I brush it off, you can see that less and less is coming off on the, and so, but I've still got a little bit. And so then I will take that and I will find an area like, say, the edge of this trap right here, and just kind of feather the brush over it. I may have to do this a couple of times to really kind of enhance the scuff on that, or I get too high up on the brush and it goes ahead and releases a lot of pigment. But yeah, as we go on kind of through there, and as I kind of run out of feeling like I'm effective, I can reload my brush and go from there. Now you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm going to show you in a minute. Actually, let me do it this way. Let me go back here to the macro stage, and I'll show you where I've been working is along the edges of this particular trapezoid. And so you grab my paper towel set up and try not to kill myself on the table. Always to be hoped for. Get that nice and dry again. And then again, feathering over the edges. And what I'm really trying to do here is just kind of darken the edges of that trapezoid ever so slightly. Kind of highlight them a little bit more than they might otherwise have done. And then sometimes I can pull up the paint from the, so, you know, it ends up with, and if I get a little too ambitious, I can go back around it with a finger or a paper towel. If I want to try and do something more like carbon scoring, I can again, just working on a flat area. As I go, I'm not putting down very much at all. I mean, you can hardly see, but it is accruing. And so, as I continue doing this, and this is not necessarily a fast process, so I do highly counsel patience. Or, you know, find yourself a Zen state to be in while you're doing it and become one with the universe and one with the paint and all that new age sort of thing.
Sequester yourself in a garage with 80s rock music, maybe?
Maybe. I mean, if you were to do that, I would recommend, you know, hairband metal, but, you know, that's just, you know, off the top of my head, you know, random selection. Maybe something in the, you know, classic heavy metal kind of, you know, realm, Ozzy Osbourne. So yeah. So again, that technique is essentially kind of the dark dry brush. And as I kind of work some of the damage from the paint that was left by the manufacturer, just kind of highlight those areas a little bit. So, actually, this isn't working all that great on this helmet. I think I'm probably being a little too timid, but also it's attempting to put white on black, or black on white, sorry, and that's not really a natural combination. So you could actually go with something more like a silver, which I won't do immediately. Oh, hey, there's more cups. Because we're doing a silver and zinc for the other two items here in just a second. So we'll go ahead and set our trooper aside, because those effects aren't really all that noticeable, unfortunately. Well, some of that's the wash left over, though, more so than the dry brushing. I appreciate the vote of confidence. But, yeah. So for Lola and for the blaster, what we'll do is we'll actually bounce between a metallic zinc and a metallic silver. So the metallic zinc will be more of a kind of a base metal kind of thing, and the silver will be more of a shine or a highlight to things. So that's not silver, that's gray. That is silver. So there we go. stir that up just the tiniest bit. And to see them sitting in the paint pot, it'd be hard pressed to tell a lot of difference in them. So, there we go. Although, actually, again, with the brightness so high on the camera, they do actually look very different. To my eye, they don't look as different as that camera view just showed, so what do I know? So what I'll like to do is, for an area where something has just kind of maybe flaked off, I'll want to do the zinc. So I'll start with kind of a smaller brush, since we're dealing with a smaller model in Lola here. And I'll just take some of those areas that I had hit with the sandpaper, and I'll try and, it is not picking up a lot of pigment. There we go. So, and again, just kind of feathering it over the sharp edge will kind of start to bring out. This would be a lot easier if my glasses hadn't disappeared. Because then I would be able to see what it is I'm actually leaving on this plastic. But again, as I kind of go back and forth on it, I can start to see that I'm adding just ever so slightly much kind of zinc, kind of dark metallic to it along these edges, and giving me kind of that almost worn look, like I've run, say, cloth or something against it repeatedly. For the blaster, that'll be more of where we'll use it for things like areas where the blaster would hit the holster, for example, and rub against the leather and polish away the finish and expose the metal underneath. So we'll actually throw some of the color around the eye there. Kind of just give that a little bit more of a look there. So, and again, we can also take our silver. Where's my dip water at? There it is. Okay. And then actually try and hit these edges here on the wing doors. I may want to actually redispense that paint after shaking it very violently to the point where CPS might be called.
So if you wanted to use more like intense weathering, like something, I know a lot of stuff you do is like with sand and dirt, actual dirt and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
What would you use?
So that's actually going to be a technique that I'll cover tomorrow, but we can go ahead, we can cover it here, because you could do the same thing with a hard surface as well. And in fact, I did that technique with the helmets on the spikes outside. What I will do is I'll mix a mixture of glue and water and a very light tan paint, especially if I'm doing a sand sort of thing. I'll try to have the paint match whatever it is, the dirt that I'm trying to apply, whatever particulate matter I'm trying to apply. So if I'm applying, say, light sand, then I'll go with a tan, and then I'll spray or airbrush that onto the surface nicely, liberally, and I'll sprinkle it with the sand, and then I'll let that dry. And the amount of wood glue in there isn't a lot, but it's enough to hold on to some of the sand. And so when I come back later and brush off a lot of it, again, I'm left with sand in the nooks and crannies, and the areas where sand would accumulate if it was being blown around for weeks upon months upon years or what have you, in the desert. There's my water bottle. And then that sand will tend to stick there. I mean, it's not going to stand up to a lot of really heavy abuse, as it were. Oh, there it is. That's what I was looking for. But it will, it will stick there, and it is a nice effect. And so I've done that on bandoliers for Jawas, for example, and that'll be the example we'll use tomorrow, actually, honestly. Thank you. Great. Awesome. So, but yeah, that'll kind of stick in the nooks and crannies of the leather, and the paint and the glue will actually add a nice, almost, I don't want to call it a sheen, because sheen implies that it shines. It's more of a dulling, so it kind of takes some of the shine off the leather, makes it look older, makes it look like it's been used or abused or what have you for a little while. And so all right, so I'll pass Lola around, and hopefully you can kind of catch some of the areas where I've applied the zinc and silver. It's subtle, but it's kind of meant to be. So, and then we'll actually launch into the blaster, which will be the more interesting effect, I believe, and probably the sort of thing you're going to want to weather more often than a toy flying droid. So, all right. So with the blaster, again, we're going to work with the same two basic colors, the zinc and the silver, and actually what we'll do is we'll add black to this mix as well, because we'll do a quick black wash over here at the emitter cone, and what we'll do is we'll kind of just run it up and down the holes of the emitter cone, and then kind of back and forth across each one until we build up kind of what I view as kind of an exhaust burn, if you will. Now, granted, it's a blaster; it uses Tabana gas to excite molecules and all that, but I think there's kind of an expectation that it would leave something akin to a powder burn along the edge of the emitter, and so that's what we're going for. There is just a nice, almost a carbonized, kind of surface to just the surface of those holes. And then we can do the same thing on the actual cone itself. Be a little more liberal with that. Kind of knock down some of the shine on the leading edge of the gun. And even along the inside of the, and again, you're not trying to put a coat of paint on it. What you're trying to do is have it deposit little bits of paint that, if you do it enough, you end up with kind of a dusting of paint. It's a finer dust than you would get out of a spray gun or airbrush, sorry, but not, so, yeah. There we go, knock that down a little bit, and kind of do the same thing for these. Nice circular motions around the holes, so that as I cross the hole, what happens is the bristle will catch in the hole, and then when it comes back out the other side, it will deposit a little bit of paint on the edge of the hole. And then we'll go ahead, there we go. So, and I will leave some of the holes undone, so you can at least see the difference between the way it was before I started and where we got with the actual weathering process. And then we'll finish this row, and then we'll move on to more of the silver and zinc treatments, which, again, this is the sort of work that I really like to do. I like close work that's very detail oriented and takes a little while, and kind of lets me get into a different zone, not think about anything but how much paint I'm leaving on the item. So it's it's a little therapeutic, I guess you could say. you know, but we're not here to solve my psychological problems. So for the zinc, I will tend to, for example, paint the edge or try to silver the edge of the trigger, especially right on the corner where the finger would have gone in, and pull against it repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly. And then I'll do the same thing for the trigger surround, kind of right adjacent to it. So I'll just throw a nice lightning along the edge of the trigger guard, the back edge of the trigger guard, that is, to again kind of imply somebody has been using this gun a lot. And same thing for that trigger again. And then sometimes, depending on how saucy I'm feeling, I'll even brighten up this spot right here where you would have your finger resting if you were practicing good trigger discipline. You know, there's no sense in not encouraging good habits. So again, that's just going to be a matter of kind of lightly taking the dry brush and kind of stroking the general area to leave a little bit of paint in each layer, so that you end up with some softening of that corner there. And then once you've kind of got a nice, almost a finger-like outline along that part of the weapon, then you can actually go in and start adding your highlights for wear and tear. And so I would take the silver and just on the very edges of the things I just covered, I would throw the silver on there, just slightly more weathered into the metal. And then for anything that I think might have slid in and out of a holster for very often, so almost all this leading edge of the gun, for example, I would want to try and produce a wear pattern on. And I'm using the brighter silver for that. Kind of, highlight metal being exposed underneath. And especially along that bottom edge there. Go ahead and go along that edge like so. And there's a couple areas that we're a little heavy on. So I will just actually make the whole rest of it a little heavier. And that's the nice thing, is that you can weather as heavy or as light as you prefer. There are certain standards, certain costumes, certain props that need to have been weathered to a certain level. But by and large, it's kind of up to your own particular taste in things. Add a little interest to the knobs and the buttons on the scope mount. And then one final thing I think we'll do, and that may take us to time. What time is it getting to be? 10 till. Okay, so yep, perfect. So again, on the sight mounts, anything that sticks out further than anything else should probably look like it has been beaten up a little bit. And you can enhance that effect by going after it with a bit of sandpaper and dulling the edge, dulling the corner a little bit. Or if you wanted to make it look like it'd been kicked around a lot, you could do the trick I mentioned earlier of throwing in a box with some like quarter-inch bolts or nuts. Nuts probably better than bolts, unless you really want to do some heavy damage, in which case those bolts will definitely do the job for you. And just kind of shake it around, and that'll especially on a plastic prop, that'll tend to dent it in a way that would really kind of give you that look of distress and ancientness, if you will. The final thing that I want to hit is trying to kind of weather up the grip a little bit more. And again, we can kind of infer, even though we're not necessarily told, although the original weapon was in fact a wood grip, that these are wood grips, and that wood in the Star Wars universe behaves basically the same as wood in our universe. So we have we have a pretty good leg up on that kind of information. But if you've ever seen, a piece of wood that's been stained and then used, you'll know that eventually that stain only goes so deep, and so you end up with a kind of a wear pattern that exposes more of the natural wood underneath. And a lot of times the natural wood underneath is a white wood more than a like a walnut or a mahogany or anything like that. And so what I like to do on the grips is, and actually that's going to need a little more brown, but so we'll show that here in a second. Come on. Really? It worked. So it's essentially it's this tan color and this brown color. I think this is actually just called brown, and this one is a desert sand. And the color I've ended up with is a little darker than, actually a fair bit darker than the tarp. So it's more, again, it's almost the same as that Schmutz wash we did earlier. But we're not doing it as a wash, we're doing it as a dry. And so go ahead and clean off my brush and load up and kind of start. And so what I like to do is, because this is a curved item, I like to take the highest part and start from there and work my way out. And I'll just, kind of go over it and then, add a little more paint, go over it some more. I'll try to do it in an oval pattern that kind of mimics the contour of the grip. And so, there we go. And if I get it to do what I want it to do, it will eventually, maybe not before we're out of time for the session, but as I hit the center more frequently and the outer edges less frequently, it should give me a deeper coat of the lightning around the screw head and the hump of the grip than on the outside, and so we end up with ideally a lightened area in the wood where we have sweat or rubbed away the layers of stain and are left with more of the wood underneath. So, and I might have wanted to go ahead and maybe put in even a little more of a yellow into it to kind of bring some of that up, because the effect I'm ending up with is kind of subtle, but what I'll do is I'll go ahead and finish out this round of it, and then I will pass this around just to kind of take a look at the various areas of the blast dry touched and see how those areas have been changed a little bit. Okay, very good. So, any questions since we're about to be out of time? Before we kind of wrap up and let the next non-me panel come in. Oh, we do have a giveaway. That is true. We had a second giveaway. I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, sorry. That came in. Yeah, sorry. I got so involved in everything else that. Sir.
Do you use those paints also on Java so it looks like sand or something?
So as we talked earlier, I'll use the same kind of paint, acrylic paint, mixed with water and wood glue to add to like the bandolier and the various parts of the cloth to kind of enhance that sandy effect. And yeah, so I tend to use the acrylics a lot. I mean, if for something that's really, if I'm trying to really weather fabric specifically, I will go for fabric paint and mix the primary colors into more of the shades I want, and go from there. Like my Blue Squadron pilot suit has a fairly heavy weather to it, because but it's a lot of black and dirt kind of in the seams and some areas underneath the armpits and down the back, where people sweat a lot, that sort of thing. And the belts, have a lot of kind of dark schmutz to them as well, for the ejection harness and the flare belt and things like that. So those are things I added in acrylic, in a fabric paint, just if I ever needed to launder the suit, which I hardly ever do, it would be more likely to survive the process and not have to be reweathered completely. Whereas the acrylics will tend to wash out. So, very good. All right, giveaway.
I'm gonna say, so what we have is a Boba Fett 1/12 scale plastic model kit.
Nice.
Boba Fett.
Ah.
What I'm gonna say is, I'm gonna ask a question, and whoever can get the closest in number that I've got here is going to be the winner of it, okay? This is a tough one, I'm not even gonna lie. How many estimated deaths are there in the original trilogy? I know, what do you think in a general number could it be? Total number of deaths. Throw out some numbers.
10 million.
Okay.
15 million.
Okay. 20,000? Okay. 19,000?
380 million.
380 million?
I can't play, but
I'm gonna say you got the closest, because the actual number is 2 billion.
well, by the time you blow up an Alderaan,
Yeah, you blew up all the wrong. So I'm gonna go ahead and.
Over a billion people on it. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Congratulations.
yeah.
About that one.
All right. Absolutely. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your attention.